talk about chord progression and start with the dominant to tonic progression, the most common and it's stated the most satisfying chord progression you can hear. Here's 5 and here's 1. And we can play that in different versions and hear the same effect over and over again. So we get this 5 chord that wants to go to 1, and we looked at this tritone here collapsing into 2/3 of our tonic chord, this note here staying the same. So we have within the diatonic chord system a chord that progresses by 2.5 steps, or in other words a perfect fourth. Here's our perfect fourth, and we can continue that cycle of progression by approaching the 5 chord from the 2 chord. Here's our 2 chord, there's our 5 chord, and then on to the 1 chord. The 2-5-1 being probably the most common chord progression. Then we have the 6 chord by the same distance, a perfect fourth. So we got a 6 chord, a 2 chord, a 5 chord, and the 1. We get to the 6 chord from the 3, and we get to the 3 chord from the 7. Okay, so if you're at the tonic and want to go one more step, you can go to the 4 chord, which of course is a perfect fourth above the 1 chord. Now we've used all of our chords. Here's our 2 minor chord up here. Here's our root, moves up a fourth to G7, and then moves up a fourth to C. We'll just drop it an octave. So we have this root movement that goes from here to here to here. Alright, so if we start from the B half diminished 7th, here's our 4, here's our 3 minor 7th, 6 minor 7th, 2 minor 7th, 5 7th, to the 1, which is a major 7th in a major key, or could be. Alright, so let's just look at that. Here's the chord progression in terms of just roots. Doesn't get much easier than that. Alright, and then there's the common ice cream chord progression, 1-6-2-5 or 1-6-4-5. There it is as 1-6-2-5. 4 and 2 substituting freely for each other. 2 being the relative minor of 4. Okay, and then we can also turn that progression around and start in the middle of it with the 2 to the 5 and go to the 1 and then the 6. We can do something kind of interesting with this 6 chord. Play it as a dominant 7th chord. So now it's a secondary dominant. It's the dominant of the 2 chord. And you get another endless chord progression. And here we can insert chords into our progression. Here's our 2-5-1, and let's go to a 7B 7th chord. That's the secondary dominant of the 3 chord. secondary dominant on 6, and it's the dominant of the 2 chord. 5 chord's already a dominant, and it's the dominant of the 1 chord. Here's our 2 chord as a secondary dominant, dominant of the 5 chord, or sometimes referred to as the double dominant. And a real common chord to use in the key. It doesn't really change the key, it's just there temporarily as a dominant of something other than 1. Very common technique. But here we always have this root motion of force.